You doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave, the founder of the highest paid part-time job in the world options training course. And we're going into our laws of game episode. And what we're going to talk about is why most lotto winners end up broke. In this video, this particular lesson was created for people that want to kind of understand how they can get the life that they desire by changing the patterns in their life. And what we don't talk about a lot is how most people are operating under a pattern or under a program or under a lot of habits that are very much ingrained in their life. And what they don't understand is how they pretty much override they pretty much override everything else they're doing in their life. So they have like a master program that they're operating under. So even when they start trying to change a lot of the smaller things, because that master program is operating in their life, it's not allowing them to get the success that they desire, because they need to start looking at what is the overall program or the pattern that I'm on. And I'm going to kind of talk about my own life and use myself as an example so people can understand it, because one of the ways in which you kind of understand what's going on in the world is you look at your own individual life. So this is going to be a video for somebody that really wants to understand how they can get the life that they desire by changing patterns. And what we're going to do is we're going to use myself, but we're also going to use lotto winners. Now, we see that everybody knows about the lotto, the Powerball, Cash 3. I think, down here in the state of Florida, you got might be so many $1,000s a month for the rest of your life, which I think really is the best lotto as opposed to the big balls, because it's essentially a form of an annuity. However, you have these particular programs, and what people do is they hit a lot of times the big Powerballs, the big payouts. And we find, as I was doing some research, is that the average person that wins these big pots, they're usually filing bankruptcy. They're not just out of lotto money, they're usually bankrupt, right? So they're going through all their lotto money. They don't have any assets, or their debts are greater than their assets after 5 years and they're winning that particular lotto. That's amazing, because you look at a person, they win millions of dollars. How do you end up with a negative net worth to the point where you now got to file, either it's Chapter 7 or Chapter 11 bankruptcy at the end of that 5-year run? And a lot of people will say, well, if you win lotto, all you got to do is do this, and all you got to do is do this, and all you got to do is do that. And, you'll be good. And what they're really doing is they're on the outside looking, and it's very similar to when guys hit the professional leagues. So you have players that come from poverty, go into a professional leagues, and you sign for, when Jameis Winston got signed by the Bucks, he signed for $25 million guaranteed. Essentially, he was wealthy, right? He got $25 million guaranteed the day he signed that contract. Eventually, he was wealthy. You got $25 million guaranteed to come to you over 7 years, you're wealthy. Right, even though the tax man gonna take a lot of that money, you still at the end of this should be a double-digit millionaire, right? And if you understand how to manage that, you can continue to build out your wealth position. What we see with a lot of these guys is that they end up broke, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not just that they're irresponsible with money. It's not just that they got a lot of baby mamas or they buy a lot of jewelry and chain. It's not that, and that's something that we really don't explore. We look at a lot of ancillary stuff. We start talking about human behavior. We look at all the ancillary things. We do a lot of single factor analysis. We don't look at what is the result that we actually want out of this particular person, and how can we build them up to get that result. We make people believe that if you just change one thing about your life, everything else will change in your life. It doesn't really work that way, because you didn't start off where you're at with one thing. Your life was built in a particular direction that is getting the results that you're getting now. So you got to ask yourself, how did you build this up? So what is the foundation of you not getting the results that you desire? So we see this same thing repeat over and over again. So we're looking at why do most lotto winners end up broke? And the reason they end up broke is because before they ever won lotto, they were on a pattern. So let's say I'm Joe Schmo and I work in manufacturing, unskilled. I make $35,000 a year. I spend most of my money on things that are not going to ever allow me to build any wealth, right? I don't play the market. I don't do real estate investing. I don't do crypto investing. I don't, look at any bonds. Don't do futures. I don't do any kind of investing that's going to allow me to generate some type of passive return off my income. And it's not that I don't do it because I don't have the money. That's just not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in working, going to the bar on the weekend, having sex, eating food, maybe watching a movie here and there, maybe watching a football game. So me winning the lotto really is a way for me to do more of that just with more money. Because these are already my habits. These are already the patterns that I'm operating in. So if I win the lotto, it's just going to allow me to do more of that on a higher level. Now, people will say, well, money just makes you more of who you are. Money doesn't make you more of anything. You're who you are with or without the money. If you're a trick and you got no money, you're trying to figure out how to trick with no money, which is what most of these guys on the internet is doing. So let me go to Colombia so I can trick with less money. If they win $500 million in Powerball, they going to still be that same trick. They just got more money to trick off. But they was already in a pattern of tricking. You got to understand that. Money don't make you more of anything, right? Money just makes you who you are with money. You're going to still be the same person. You're not more of. You're just who you are. Now you got money. It's like I can give you 30 cars. You're not more of who you are because you got 30 cars. You're who you are with 30 cars. So that's what you got to understand. Most lotto winners end up broke because they didn't have the habits in the first place of somebody that was building wealth, which is the reason why they was playing lotto. Most people that I know that are consumed with building wealth don't play lotto. I'm not saying that playing lotto is a bad thing. To me, if you put $1 on Powerball and you come back with $100 million, a great return on your investment. I'm just not consumed with playing Powerball. I don't know what the Powerball is this week because I'm not consumed with that because I don't really think that's a solution to my problem. So I'm not against anybody playing the lotto. My thing is most people that I know that are trying to build wealth, they're not worrying about the lotto. They don't know the Powerball number. They don't know the cash tree. To me, the people making all the money on the lottos are people that organize the lotto. And that's a whole nother story. We're not going to go into that. So you got to understand when a person wins lotto, they're who they are before they won the lotto. They win the lotto. They're still who they are. So what was their pattern before they ever won the lotto? And their pattern before they ever won the lotto, unless they decide to change their pattern, they're going to be the exact same person they were. They just not got a lotto windfall. Nothing's going to change. So if you already, before you won the lotto, was bad managing money, right? You was bad managing money. Why would you be good at managing money just because you won lotto? You already were bad managing money. You already were not. Before you won lotto, you were not concerned with how to build wealth, how to create some type of passive income assets. You weren't concerned with that. So why would you not be concerned with that now that you won lotto? So you was an NFL player and nobody in your family knows anything about building wealth. Having this symposium where these financial people going to come in and talk to you for one weekend, it's not going to change you. Why? Because that's not who you were before you ever got into the NFL. This is why it means nothing to pay those guys that money. Why? They're going to give it all right back. That's why it don't mean anything to have people hit lotto. Why? Because they're going to give it all right back. So the system doesn't mind creating overnight millionaires through sports or entertainment. Why? Because you're going to give it all right back. They don't mind creating overnight millionaires through lotto. Why? Because you're going to give it all right back. You're going to buy what they produce as a result of your pattern. So we're going to get the money back from you anyway. You understand me? So when we start talking about people and building people, we got to start looking at how do people get built from the ground up. Because changing ancillary things, so I tell people all the time, information don't change people, right? We got a bunch of Negroes with a whole alphabet behind their name. Nothing has changed for us. Why? Because more information don't change people. And they've been educated to not change, right? So we got to start looking at building people from the ground up. That's what changes people. So then when they get into situations, they know how to utilize that situation in a better way or in a more beneficial way to get the results that they were already seeking. So let me give an example. There's a guy I know does a lot of big real estate on social media. Older dude, but he been through a lot of real estate cycles. If he was just to randomly win Powerball, he would take that money and put that money into real estate. He wouldn't go to Vegas and trick off. He wouldn't do a lot of cocaine. He wouldn't, buy a bunch of cars. He would 100% take that money and put it into real estate. That's what he would do. Why? Because that's already what he's doing. He's already doing that. So his attitude is, I just got me a big capital base to not go buy me some more real estate. He does hotels and all kinds. He does like big real estate projects. He go buy him another hotel, right? And to me, you got to be crazy to be in a hotel game. Like, cause I don't, you got a 100 unit hotel. To me, you got 100 headaches, but that's me. Everybody's different. But that's the kind of real estate plays he makes. So that's what he would do. But why? Because that's already his pattern. So let's talk about myself. I was a person for years. My pattern was I make a lot of money and then I stop being focused on making money. And then I go through the money that I make. Then I make a lot of money. I would stop being focused on making money. I would go through the money I make. I'll make a lot of money. And that was my pattern. So my pattern was always hustle real hard Once I got to a certain number, I stopped feeling like, okay, I don't have to hustle as hard as I hustled. I would go through some of that money. Then once I hit a certain number, I would wake up and hustle back up to that number again. And then once that number went down, I would wake up. Now, my number never went to zero. But let's say in a hypothetical example, it's almost like a radiator where your radiator is designed to cut on, right? And to start flushing more coolant through your car once your car hits certain temperatures, a function inside. And now, especially now because of computerization. So your radiator is designed, once this car hits a certain temperature, not only is the radiator cut on, but the fans cut on to cool your car down. Once your car gets under a certain temperature number, the fans cut off and the radiator does not flush coolant at that same speed or the same velocity. I don't know what that particular term you use, because your car is no longer as hot, right? Then it does that over and over again as you're driving. So I was operating the same way off that same type of function. I would work extremely hard to get to a certain number. Once I got to that number, I wouldn't work as hard. Once that number went down and hit a certain number, I would get triggered. I would go back up and work really hard to get that number. But what does that mean? You're constantly yo-yoing, right? Instead of you building a position and then building off that position, you constantly yo-yoing. Because once you hit a certain number, that triggers you to say, well, you know what, I don't have to work as hard anymore. Then once you get down to a certain number, it triggers you and say, okay, so I was really concentrating on staying in a range as opposed to doing it like this. I'm going to go from this number to this number, right? Then I'm going to build off that number and go from this number to that number. Then I'm going to build off that number and go from this number to that number. That's really how you build wealth, right? You can make a lot of money, but if you're not thinking, go from here to here, build off that, go from here, it's going to be hard to build wealth because what? You're going to be using it and utilizing it, right? Without adding more to it. So I was one of them type of people to where if once I hit a certain number, if I didn't bring nothing in for 3 months, I wasn't tripping. Why? Because I knew I had money, right? And I wasn't below a certain number to where I got worried about it. Instead of what I should have been doing was once I get to a certain number, okay, now the goal is to use it as a baseline. That becomes my new baseline to go up off of that number. So to make that my foundation. So let's say hypothetically in a hypothetical example, I go from 0 to 20K, right? Now 20K is my new baseline. Now I go from 20K to 80K. Okay, 80K is my new baseline. Now I go from 80K to 110,000. Right now, 110,000 now my new baseline. I don't say, well, you know what, I got 110,000. I'm not going to trip till I drop to 50 grand. Right? Because 50 grand is not my foundation. My new foundation is 110,000. And so you constantly building off that number. So you got to understand that was my pattern. So for me to change my life, I had to change my pattern. Me going and learning some more information wasn't going to change me. I had to decide I was going to change my pattern, right? And my belief system about how to build wealth and my belief system about what pattern I should be on and what we're getting ready to roll into now I really had to change my standards. And what I want you to understand is this is going to be like a radical statement to a lot of people. I learned this from a guy that make a lot of money. Like he makes so much money. People have a lot of issues with the guy, but God just figured out how to make a lot of money. Dude up in New York City. He told me everybody in the world is living to their standard. He didn't say they living up to their standard. He says they living to their standard, right? So it means they're living horizontally to their standard. So their standard is at a certain point. They're right at that point. And I'm going to kind of show you in visuals what I mean, but I want you to understand is that everybody, you, myself included, you're currently living at the standard you set for yourself, and you're not doing it in one area. You're doing it in every area of your life. So you got an overall standard and then you have separate parts. So we got a comprehensive life and then you got, we can compartmentalize that into different areas. And what a lot of people do is they try to say, well, you know what? I got standards for other situations, but it doesn't have anything to do with them. So, we see in a relationship game, people say, well, you know what? I don't want to do this and this and this because that's beneath my standard. They talking about the other person, not talking about themselves. So how they're currently living is their standard, but their standard is to make the standard for other people, not for themselves. Because what I want you to understand is that when you change standards for yourself, the people around you will change. But, to keep the relationship content selling, we got to talk about how everybody else is supposed to change, but not you. Right? That's how we keep the relationship content selling. But in reality, if you change the standards for you, the people around you will change. And you'll find that those people will have similar standards to you. Why? Because they're around you. You can't get me to believe that you got a certain level of standards and nobody else around you has those same standards. Then why are you around these people? I know better than that because I come from a real life. So you got to understand is that everybody's living to this standard. I'm going to kind of show you what I'm talking about in visuals. So when you're looking at the world, right? Look at the world. Everybody in the world is either living at their standard or they working towards their new standard, which is their standard. That's everybody in the whole world. Nobody in the world is at a standard that they find unacceptable and they're not doing something about it. So I'm going to repeat myself. No one in the world is at a standard that they believe to be unacceptable and they're not currently doing something about it. So what a lot of people try to sell you on this internet is I don't like something about my life. But what are you doing about what you don't like about my life? Nothing. Do you like it? That's your standard. Whatever you say you don't like, if you're not currently working to try to change it, it is your standard. Because if you're dealing with it, it's your standard. If you find it that I'm not going to deal with it, it's not your standard. So if you work in a job, I'm not trying to tell nobody to quit their job. But what the job knows is that if you come to work every day, regardless of what you say you got problems with on this job, if you keep coming here and a year later you're still here, and 2 years later you're still here, and 3 years later you're still here, this is your standard. The way they treat you is your standard. What you have to deal with on that job is your standard. Why? Because you keep showing up. We 3 and 4 years into this. You keep showing up. So they know after a certain amount of time, who are their regulars? Who are they people that's going to show up regardless of whatever we put them through, they still going to be here. That's their standard. I want you to really understand that about people. So the internet's created a lot of opportunities for people to try to convince other people that what's going on in their life is not their standard. It got to be if it's been going on for a prolonged period of time. I'm not saying people not going to go through trials and tribulations. I'm not saying that people are not going to have challenges they're going to have to overcome. But when you are dealing with something for an extended amount of time and it becomes consistent in your life, it is because it is your standard, right? So here's your life. You got an area above your standard. That's where you're not at because it's above your standard. You got your standard. That's where you're currently at. Then you got below your standard. That's what you will find unacceptable. And this plays out in every area of your life. It's your overall scenario. And then there's different compartments of your life that's playing out. We're going to kind of go into that. So let's talk about the Lotto winner. $500 million in Lotto winnings. That's above that person's standard. Why do I know? Because their standard was $30,000 a year in income. So them winning Lotto was above their standard. What was beneath their standard? $10,000 a year in income. That's unacceptable to them. Now, let me tell you something that's very powerful. And it plays into what I'm trying to get people to really understand. This is the overarching point.